Welcome to this edition of the Infosys Consumer Spotlight live webinar. My name is Samad Masood, Content Strategy and Marketing Lead for the Infosys Knowledge Institute. I'm joining you live from my home in London to moderate today's exciting discussion. The past year has been one of continued disruption, particularly supply chain disruption. Of course, there was COVID, snowstorms in the US, driver shortages in the UK, and the Suez Canal blockage, among many other things, have all combined to expose the fragility of our interconnected supply chains. This has further fueled debates over whether supply chains should be more resilient and maybe less lean, or whether a good balance between the two can be achieved with so-called intelligent supply chain systems that can better predict, plan, and react. To delve into this further, we're very honored to be joined by a specialist in understanding how data can drive real-time decisions in the consumer products industry. Please let me introduce Anubhav Singh, former Unilever Director of Real-Time Visibility and Analytics, joining us from Bangalore in India. Hello, Anubhav.
Hello, hi.
And joining me from Infosys is Rahul Ubgade, Associate Vice President for Consumer, Retail and Logistics, also joining me from London. Hi, Rahul, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you? Great to see both of you. Looking forward to this session.
Great. A big welcome to you all, and welcome to all of the audience who are joining us on the various channels. So to get us started, Anubhav, I want to just set the scene a bit with you. First, please, if you could tell us a bit about your background and what you've been doing, but also what you've seen in the last 2 years that really have been new challenges that have been coming up and define this kind of new era that we've entered into.
Sure, no, absolutely. So my area of expertise is actually supply chain end-to-end, be it procurement, manufacturing, order to cash planning. And within that space, it's technology for supply chain. And that's the area I've been working for the last 20 years. Over the last 2 years, I think there are 3 or 4 things which have become distinctly different because of the context you laid, Samad. First, in my view, is the need for visibility, right? And I think all along, most organizations had very good visibility within their supply chain, which is starting from their factory to their depots and to the customer. But last 2 years, there has been a very, very strong need for visibility in the broader ecosystem. And specifically with the need for resilience, a lot of visibility on what the suppliers are doing operationally. And a lot of companies are now using third-party manufacturers. So equally having complete visibility to what is the production, what is the inventory, etc. of third-party manufacturing has become critical. So I think expanding the visibility beyond your own 4 walls and getting a full visibility to the ecosystem and how to get that connected data has become one big challenge which everybody's striving for, specifically post the pandemic. Second, as you rightly said, to manage the whole triangle between agility, responsiveness at the right cost, a lot of focus has come within that important function of planning. So how do I forecast given the complexity of exploding SKUs, and how do I get data machine learning into how do I forecast? How do I reduce the cycle time of my planning? How can I go from a weekly to a daily production planning, daily distribution planning, daily materials requirement planning? So shrinking the cycle time of the whole supply system has become, I would say, a massive theme coming through. The third theme which I'm seeing emerging in the last couple of years is with the explosion of e-commerce, with D2C, B2B, B2B2C, all of those new channels emerging, and the percentage growth coming from those channels. I think moving from a pure make to stack kind of an organization, most companies are now starting to embrace the whole concept of available to promise or advance available to promise. How can I promise to a customer order coming through? And then ensuring the whole last mile delivery efficiently track and trace. And most importantly, to be able to do it with cost and efficiency using the whole cost to serve model, I think is a theme emerging very strong. And the last one, clearly with commodity prices rising, there is a huge pressure in cost across the supply chain. So automation, be it physical automation within your manufacturing or logistics, or process automation coming through intelligent or cognitive automation so that we can take better decisions and reduce cost, is another big theme coming through. So these are the 3 or 4 differential themes, some of them seeing coming through in the industry now.
Yeah. Great. And I suppose just to follow a bit more on with that with you, Anubhav, those key themes, visibility, as you say, planning ability. It's not that these have been absent in the past. It's just we need to have a higher level of them in order to meet those things you were saying about the e-commerce and the commodity cross the driving. So all of these themes kind of relate to each other, don't they? Could you tell us a bit about, give us an example or a view of how hard it is to do some of these things now. What are the challenges that we face right now with visibility? You mentioned, for example, with planning, being able to do daily rather than weekly cycles. Is that not the norm today? I mean, what's the situation that you see across businesses that are trying to achieve this visibility?
So just a couple of insights in that space, Samad, right? So for example, traditionally forecasting, which is a very important element in planning, used to be a monthly process with a little bit of fine tuning happening at a weekly level. And it used to be very base statistical model using past sales. Now that has been completely revamped. We are seeing with the explosion and complexity of SKUs, we can no longer rely on human beings to forecast. We need a good machine learning model which can forecast the thousands and millions as SKUs we want to be forecasted. And for that, what becomes important is all the key inputs for that forecasting is available. So you need inputs on weather, you need inputs from the social sentiment, you need inputs on what promotions you're running, you need inputs on what advertising you're going to do. So getting good quality data so that then you can use advanced data science to forecast becomes very, very critical. Planning solutions were available for the last 15 years. And there was that one planning solution which everybody used. But over a period of time, people have realized a lot of intervention was still happening manually. And now people are looking at one, state-of-the-art planning solutions. Secondly, to make sure that whatever outcome comes from the machine is directly implementable. We no longer have people who are running the process. We actually have machines guided by humans who are setting the parameters, running the process. And that is bringing up a completely new breed and new variants of planning solutions coming through.
Exciting. Rahul, from a kind of vendor technology point of view, what are the sort of solutions that you see in these spaces that are emerging? Because as Anubhav's saying, we're moving to an era of more forward rather than backward looking things, and more automated rather than manually driven or supported processes. Is the technology there to do this?
No, absolutely, and it is there, and it is quite matured, and I think there is a whole change involved, and that has got accelerated. We can see the companies adopting to the capabilities and techniques which Anubhav just spoke about. So one of the things, just to explain in the forward looking, is the way the companies were, particularly the CPG and FMCG type of companies, were looking at shipments historical to derive their forecast. More and more companies we're seeing adopting the point of sale data at a store SKU level, going very granular, going very closer to the real demand, and blending it with the inputs they are going to drive, be it the promotions, features, or even social media, which may have direct impact on the sales, along with the weather parameters, which Anubhav spoke about. Blending all this in the algorithms at scale, it is absolutely today possible, and it's being done by the leading companies. We have seen this even accelerating in last 2 years, and it is coming to a point where it becomes humanly difficult to manage that complexity. So autonomous is the way to go, and we are clearly seeing this autonomous theme, and this is not only in planning. It comes with the flexibility which will to be driven in terms of the execution, and finally bringing the control, and particularly on the cost and escalations, which was also spoken some time back by you and Anupam. So that is our view on where this is heading.
So the tech is there, but I imagine, this is a big change in the way, CPG retail organizations are thinking about things. I mean, culturally as well as from a process point of view. I mean, operationally, Anubhav, how would you sort of advise organizations, or how do you feel this sort of stuff can be adopted effectively? Because it's not as simple as just sort of updating. One day you're looking backwards, the next day you're looking forwards, and with some new software, right? I mean, how can you actually ensure that this sort of stuff changes the way you do business as well.
No, absolutely. That's a great point, right? Because I think sometimes we tend to over-index and focus on the technology and the digital aspects of things, while clearly that is the differentiator. That is absolutely not enough, right? And having worked in large MNCs, I think what comes out very clearly is unless we have a complete grip of the 2B business process, Samad, so knowing what your business process should look like in the future, and that's a proper exercise which needs to be done where you look at your current business processes, see if that is good enough to deliver the business prerogatives, or if the process needs to be changed. So that definitely needs to happen. And then of course to see how the 2B process can be enabled by the different digital technologies, and you can look at them through the systems of record, systems of differentiation, systems of intelligence, which we can talk about later. And equally the organization, right? So is the organization fit for purpose? Do you want to do everything internally? Is that your core competence? Or do you want to leverage other service providers possibly who are better at driving processes? So each of these processes need to be looked at from a process lens, organization lens, digital lens, to come to what should be the totality of the roadmap. But exactly as you said, the culture piece, the landing piece, the adoption piece is possibly equally important than these three pieces. Right? In the past, most IT programs have been guilty of not having enough budget. We barely reach the touch line, finish the project, do PGLS, and seldom spend time and effort figuring out whether the solution is actually landed in the market. Do people use it? A base ECC ERP, I think it's okay. It's a financial solution. People end up using it. But the moment you raise up and go to core planning solutions, core transportation solutions, how do we ensure regular usage, monitor that usage, and see the value coming out of it? So I think three themes emerging. One, don't look at it as technology itself. Make sure your process reengineering is happening and your org is happening along with that. And second, spend enough effort, time on the culture, landing, adoption piece. Otherwise, we'll deliver the technology. I've seen multiple of these technologies fail in the past.
Yeah. Now you mentioned earlier, Anubhav, you started with visibility being an issue, and we're talking here about these cognitive systems and such, but do we really have the data ready? Are the foundations there to build this right now? Is there a stage that needs to be dealt with first? Because, making sure people use them, as you're saying, and doing the cultural changes is definitely important. But, we've certainly seen many cases over the years of organizations perhaps jumping into data analytics and AI and automation a bit too soon and not really having that foundation there. What are your views on that?
No, absolutely. And a lot of us have been guilty of this in the past, of straight away jumping to the advanced data science, machine learning, etc., without ensuring that the base is already in place. And I think a very good blueprint or a framework to look at your readiness for any of these advanced digital capabilities is to look at them in three layers, right? And we talk about the layer called system of records, which is your base transaction system, which is where you record all of your transactions. So making sure that is fit for purpose, reasonably uniform across the markets, and is not clunky. I think that becomes critical, and that is where, while we all talk about advanced data science, still a lot of work needs to be done to what we call as modernizing the core, right? Making sure that we move to the right systems of record, which give us the right data at the right frequency and the right granularity for us to be able to perform any of the advanced data science stuff. So getting that layer becomes very critical, and all the processes around the layer. On top of that, most companies, depending upon where they want to differentiate, also put in digitization solutions for differentiation. So a very good planning solution, an advanced planning solution, will help you differentiate in the planning space. A very good transportation management solution will help you differentiate in the transportation space. A good digital factory solution will help you differentiate in the manufacturing space. So ensuring that we have the right level of digital capabilities in the second layer of differentiation becomes critical, and ensuring that we have a good, robust digitization program there becomes critical. It is only when we have got the system of records in place, we have got the right differentiation solutions in place, is when we start to look at the holy grail, which is a third layer, which is absolutely critical from an automation perspective, which is what we call as the system of intelligence, which is nothing but getting all your data in real time in the same big data infrastructure, which then allows you to go from human in the loop, which is your basic visibility, to human on the loop, which is about advanced decision making, and eventually to human out of the loop, which is cognitive automation. So I think the intent is, when you create this blueprint, equal focus needs to be given on the system of records and differentiation, and that gives you the right to then start building the systems of intelligence on top of that. If you miss the steps below, it becomes difficult, because some of exactly as you said, then you won't have the right data at the right frequency and granularity for you to be able to do any of the advanced data science stuff you want to do on top.
Yeah, that's great. I thank you. That's really helpful to see the challenge. But Rahul, I'm sure you've taken clients on this journey. That sounds like a lot of work to get to a point where we need cognitive outcomes. What's your view of how fast this can be done? How what are the kind of challenges you see, or the sort of perhaps the preparation that organizations have to take to really ensure that they can get through all of this, getting that record and differentiation system sorted before really jumping to the system intelligence.
No, I think I'll definitely echo those points. I think that's very systematically put by Anubhav. And I think without those foundation of a system of record and system of differentiation, the other thing becomes a bit of a pipe dream. And I think surrounding this, I would also say one of the learning is to getting the data governance across all these layers upfront addressed, right? Not only from compliance perspective, but this governance then becomes very important for you then to get the data which is required to drive the systems. So this is becoming almost an essential pattern for this. Now let me kind of take slightly different dimensions to the cognitive systems, which Anubhav talked about as a system of intelligence on the layer on top, and take in the context of supply chain 3 examples. So we call it as agile planning, flexible execution, and intelligent control, so that all of these are available. Now I'm taking it granted that 2 layers are there and you've taken care of the fundamentals and the governance around the data. When you have this, then I think in the 3rd layer, in a very exciting area of agile planning, you go more towards autonomous planning, where you have concurrent planning modules, and it looks at the patterns of demand. Because I think the first fundamental thing which we saw, that the entire supply chain challenge is driven by the churn in the demand and the shift in the channel, which creates a lot of uncertainty on demand side, complicated by the supply side of the uncertainty. And when you bring these 2 things together, the data is the only savior, and that's where we use probabilistic algorithms to do range of forecasts, so that your inventory planning takes care of that resilience, but in an intelligent way, data driven way, so that you don't put everything into lots of inventory piling, right? It becomes more intelligent. I think then the second part becomes the agile execution, flexible execution, right? All that great planning you're done, you may still have a challenge. And that's where the autonomous supply chain control tower concept comes into play. You have got the whole sense layer, then you have a automation layer and act layer. All of this work in sync like a human being to kind of activate things. So just to give you an example, which was spoken by Anubhav on advance available to promise, which is the order allocation. So you've got all the planning done, but now you have got this inventory. How do you manage your risk, reservation, your commitment to customer, and still maximize your case fill rate? That's where this intelligence thing come into play, right? And similarly on the controls, let's take the cost control on transportation. Anytime you can see due to labor shortages, transport truck shortages, these cost of transportation can shoot up anytime. So determining those patterns of escalation earlier and having the resolution, getting all through these 3 layers and addressing that is another thing which we are seeing being used very extensively. So I think just to summarize this, agile planning, flexible in execution, and intelligent control, all the 3 can be enabled in that top layer which Anubhav has spoken about.
Thank you, Rahul. So, I mean, let's not forget the importance of all of this. While, of course, it's making things more, faster moving, more predictable and such. But it's all in the context of a rapidly changing consumer, a consumer that's been, demanding new things and changing quite quickly. And having that data layer, having that, intelligent systems in place is one thing. But it's not just within the four walls of an organization, correct? I mean, we're talking here about chains, and you need to think about, if you're going to be changing your offer to consumers, that means you also have to be quite flexible with those partnerships that you have. So I want to ask two things in this next section. How can organizations look to sort of increase their flexibility in their partnerships at a time when, I guess, if you were saying at the start, above, you want to be able to track things all the way through the supply chain, from production, your manufacturing partners, all the way through to sale. How can that kind of, those great robust systems you're talking about, still exist when you may well be changing your ecosystem quite regularly as well?
So, a couple of themes coming through there. I think the first one, which is a great point. So, supply chain and managing agility and complexity as the number of products increase, I think is very valid, and we will come to that next. I think even before that, you make a very good point saying, what is our ability to innovate with speed at all, right? And while it goes a little beyond supply chain, I think a lot of companies are investing in digital to improve the speed of innovation, right? So how quickly can I use consumer data and social sentiment data to get market insights? What's really happening in the market? What kind of products can I launch? How can I do my R&D using digital technologies rather than using plain burners and pipettes, etc., right? How can I do consumer insights faster? How can I do consumer trialing using digital? So I think the whole theme of saying that normally an innovation would take me 2 to 3 years, but now I want to crash that so that I can get new innovation out in the market within a 3 to 6 months time, all of it using digital capabilities. I think that's coming out as a huge theme as the consumer preferences proliferate. I think that comes up very, very clearly. The repercussion on supply chain, of course, is the exploding complexity. So how do I forecast it better? So if I have got now 10 new variants, how do I forecast the variants better? Which is where the whole theme of machine learning based forecasting becomes very important, because for a human to guess cannibalization, which product will go in the market, not go in the market, becomes very difficult. So I think that becomes a big theme. On the manufacturing side, it lays huge stress, because now I can't have that usual mass manufacturing, long cycle times, long production times. I need to have smaller batches, more frequent batches, but still being able to manage my cost angle. So I think huge angle coming through on manufacturing. And then exactly as you said, equally on the ecosystem, there is pressure coming in, because then with our suppliers, we want them to be equally agile. And that is why a lot of companies are now also going for third-party manufacturing and collaborative manufacturing, because I think intrinsically everybody recognizes that every time a new product portfolio comes in, for you to build and develop your own capacity becomes very difficult. You can't keep doing it. There is a lead time to building capacity. And hence now using the broader ecosystem of third-party manufacturing and suppliers to take care of a lot of those innovation and new products is also becoming a massive theme. So absolutely right. The ecosystem becomes important to deliver agility and to take care of the complexity. But then it also means that you have to treat that ecosystem like your own. And the way you would manage your own factory, the way you would have information about your own factory, the same level of optimization and visibility needs to be there for your partner ecosystem as well.
So, but how can data that you're sharing, and we have a question that's come through from one of the audience members about, data sharing amongst the ecosystem. If what you're saying is that, you kind of have to bring those more suppliers into the fold and bring them more closer in a way, should I interpret it that way? And what does that mean about, if you're contractually in a situation where you are being open, transparent, secure, but at the same time, you may well dump that supplier at some point for something else as the market changes. I mean, that's a kind of very complicated scenario, I suppose, for businesses in the supply chain.
Yeah, and that is where segmentation becomes important. Which are the suppliers you are creating more strategically, more medium to long term, more for innovation, more for capability? And then there are suppliers which we know we are using for commodity and for scale rather than something very specific. And then you deal with that ecosystem accordingly. But I think what is more critical is, in the past, Samad, as long as we raised a purchase order and we had basic visibility to advanced shipping notification, what a supplier did beyond that would not be such a big challenge for most companies. We would treat it as a hands-off transaction. Similarly, with a third-party manufacturer. Now, because of resilience, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, that's no longer possible. We have to treat these suppliers and collaborative manufacturers like we would treat our own entities, because we are responsible for quality, for social responsibility, for sustainability. And we also need to know what stocks they are holding, which raw material, packaging material are they using, how frequently are they producing. So their technology, they are not on your ERP system, yet how do you connect to this wider ecosystem and get almost real-time data becomes absolutely critical. And we are all now looking at technologies which can give us the same level of visibility. And I spoke of the ecosystem more to do with suppliers and third-party manufacturers, but it is equally true for logistics service providers and equally true for warehousing. So increasingly, you will need absolute operational visibility to all of their data if we need to function like an ecosystem. And most companies are now investing in that space now.
That's a great point. I mean, I think we do often get dragged and sucked into the industry narrative that
Samad,
go ahead, Rahul. Yeah, please.
I want to just build on that point, because I think it's a very interesting point, because the whole ecosystem, as Anubhav explained, that it is cutting across, going to third-party warehouse providers, logistics provider, right up to the front end, even retailers. So when you look at this chain in a traditional way, where everything the organization thought has an ERP is under control, that theory completely goes off. So you need more ERP agnostic approach. And we are clearly seeing that creating of a digital twin of a supply chain, which is independent of ERP, is absolutely evolving, including for situations of traceability, to find out any product defect or anything like that. You have to block a lot of a stock, and that can be done across the value chain only if you have some layer like this. So I think that's a very important one. And I think the question on, what happens if there is a supplier, a third party you've got today, and tomorrow that party is not there? I think Anubhav said it right, that you usually work with the strategic suppliers, so you have overheads of this nature less. But I think any data system which you are today creating has to be compliant with the laws on GDPR, has to be compliant with the antitrust laws and stuff like that, which comes in the play whenever such data is being brought for multiple organizations together. If you don't have that compliance, then the data platform itself is a non-starter. So if you have platform of that nature, you can easily have the erase mechanism whenever such a situation comes in, and then you are able to comply to the law, respect the data privacy of the supplier. At the same time, you have your data which you need.
And that can be embedded, I guess, in the technologies that you're using. In the
it has to be embedded in technology. Otherwise, that technology platform is non-starter.
Great point. I want to take a question from the audience about localized manufacturing. The concept of bringing more manufacturing closer to the customer, perhaps even using things like 3D printing and such. That's taken off in the last few years. And the questions are saying it can make the supply chain more resilient and enhance customer experience, but what are the trade-offs? But I'd like to put it to you both. I mean, does it make it more resilient and enhance customer experience? I don't know if that we know that yet, but certainly, what do you see as the benefits and drawbacks to having that sort of more local manufacturing?
Do you want me to go? Okay.
Sure.
Rob, please go ahead, Rob.
So I think this is very early days for that, particularly in the industry of consumer retail logistics. There are, of course, companies doing 3D printing and managing that kind of a localized manufacturing. Some very interesting ideas have come up. I mean, there is a startup in West Coast who is now going to print beverages at home. So you will have capsule of 80 components, alcohol and sugar. That's it. It can print any beverage you want. Now, this looks bit like a pipe dream today, but I think some of these technologies will pivot and evolve. So my view in this is that, do we see our clients doing experiments in parts here and scale up only if they find some really sustainable way to do this? But I think there is a big potential, but I think we have to go through that learning curve before we can say that this is ready for prime time.
Yeah. Anubhav?
So I think there is a move towards localized manufacturing. Without doubt, it has happened in the last 2 to 3 years' time. I think most companies in the CPG space were already, I would say, between 60 to 80% localized. I think what's also coming up is more than localized manufacturing, localized suppliers, right? I think when the pandemic hit, one of the big issues which came up were long lead time cross-border suppliers, right? So I think from a supplier perspective, looking at local suppliers so that you have your manageable lead time, I think that becomes critical. I think a certain ratio is important. I don't think we can go for complete local or complete global. I think a 70-30, 80-20 ratio is what most companies aspire for. And for that 20%, it is known that your ability to service customers will be lesser, because a lot of it, at least in the CPG space, comes through ocean logistics. We all know the issues behind ocean logistics, which kind of increases the lead time. And naturally, the more the lead time, any change or fluctuation in your demand pattern coming from the consumer, you'll find it a little more difficult to meet, right? So I think short answer, definite move, specifically if it is a core part of your portfolio. Renewed focus on looking at the supplier portfolio to see that you're not getting caught short through long lead time suppliers. And of course, customer experience depends upon the lead time to service the customer.
Great, thanks. I want to talk a bit more about the human side of things. Anubhav, you talked about, as we become systems become more intelligent, having humans in the loop and then moving them out, and we talked a bit about culture and stuff. What do you see as the upskilling challenges for people in your industry as these new technologies start to come to bear? Because yes, there's cultural change, but the roles that colleagues and employees will be playing over the coming years as we start using more and more of these cognitive systems, I assume they're going to change quite a bit, aren't they?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's almost a responsibility of the team which is leading the transformation and the digital agenda to ensure that the respective resources and the functions get upskilled. And it's not just to be said. I think a very cohesive program. So suppose if I'm working in data and analytics, I equally need to have a very cohesive, concrete plan which says that I want to create, say, citizen scientists across my markets. I want almost 80 to 90% of the people to be trained in advanced data science skills, which of course serves the purpose that tomorrow when I'm coming and landing these capabilities, then people are upskilled and are able to leverage the capability properly. Otherwise, there's no point in developing a very nice, fancy machine learning driven, forward looking service reliability tool, whereas people don't understand the basics of it. I think raising the level of all resources to be able to adopt to this technology, it's a given. And if I'm launching a program today to create a big data infrastructure, I, in parallel, will absolutely have a program which ensures that all the 10,000 to 15,000 supply chain resources in the respective market and clusters have a program, almost a license to operate, which culminates in a proper certification, where people come, certify themselves, almost saying that you cannot operate in the new environment unless you have upskilled yourself. So I think that becomes absolutely important. And then also through automation, you need to make sure that as you automate and space becomes available with people, they have the knowledge and the wherewithal to be able to pick up new skills and move around. So most of these programs will absolutely fail if there isn't equivalent amount of focus given to upskilling of people. Otherwise, they won't be able to use the technology at all. And I think it's happening in most organizations now.
It's a complete revolution, really, isn't it, that needs to happen. Rahul, you had a few things to add there. I mean, I assume.
Yeah. I think, Samad, at the beginning, you asked me a question: is the technology ready? Is the data science ready? Absolutely ready for this prime time. then where's the problem? The problem is exactly what Anubhav said. The organizations have to be ready, because organizations have that human component, and it starts with that mindset, AI first mindset, cognitive first mindset, to say that yes, I can apply this AI to solve this issue. I think that's a cultural barrier for many organizations which have run well-oiled machinery and very efficiently the supply chain so far. But for the new age, they have to unlearn and basically come to this mindset first. And I think then it is all about understanding the impact of change to people, change to ways of working, change to the process, because everything is impacted by this. A very systematic change management has to be part of any such transformation. And I think lastly, the people and their skills, and that requires continuous upgradation, because it's not a one time exercise. Because by the time you learn that technology, you're already ready to unlearn and learn the new technology. So that continuous learning cycle in the organization has to be embedded as part of this for the survival.
Great, thanks. I'm going to take another question from the audience. It's about the new business models we've seen emerge over the pandemic. Someone has asked, what is the view of the viability, both operational and financial, of quick commerce? Delivery under 10 minutes, that sort of stuff, of groceries and things, and the concept of dark stores and such. How viable is this as a long-term thing from a supply chain perspective, but also as a financial and business model? Any thoughts on that, either of you?
So that's in the initial, just a couple of thoughts from my side before I hand it over to Rahul. That's why when I initially spoke about e-commerce and the impact on supply chain, I mentioned the theme called cost to serve, right? And I think that's becoming increasingly prominent exactly because of this. Because now, Samad, we don't even know whether we are viable servicing in a certain time, viable servicing a particular truckload to a particular customer, viable with a certain order size, etc. Right? That basic visibility is not there. I think it starts with the granular level of visibility of cost element to every bit, saying loading takes how much, unloading takes how much, storage takes how much, last mile delivery takes how much, order management takes how much. So getting that absolute detailed cost to serve will then give you an understanding if it is financially viable to do party packing, to do direct to store delivery, to do delivery under half an hour. It will come through that cost to serve understanding, and then you can see where you're viable and where you're not viable. Then it also gives you the ability to have a conversation with the customer saying, if we can manage the trade of terms accordingly, it becomes viable for both of us. And that is why the data and analytics around cost to serve, specifically with the new channels coming in, becomes absolutely crucial. Otherwise, we won't know where we are bleeding money.
Yeah, I think just building on that, that cost transparency is absolutely must, and it's a slider scale, right? Are you going to give in 10 minutes? Is it enough value? And what is the cost equation versus giving it in 5 hours, right? Maybe 5 hours works better, or maybe one day works better. So I think that balance has to be struck depending on category. Of course, some categories may have that value for urgency, so you have to play accordingly. And I think that's where, when you have a complex chain, multiple categories, multiple SKUs, unless you have this in a data-led approach, it will become very difficult to strike that balance. And therefore, I think getting these in a data model, establish the whole costing and various options is very crucial. Once you have that, then there are algorithms which can help you achieve that, right? You can put the constraints, you can put the cost, and then it figures out the most optimal way to deliver that. And I think companies are also partnering with startups who have that ecosystem for the fast delivery. So companies themselves don't have to invent and create it. There are innovative companies which are doing. So I think the partnership is also one of the answers to this.
So do we see a role for platforms that are managing these sort of data interactions within the ecosystem? Because if we think about some of those startups, some of those companies that are doing that quick commerce stuff, I'm reading between the lines here and guessing they probably don't have the visibility they really need to do that kind of cost equation, but we're all trying to work towards that. But with so many partners, so much complex data flying around, do we see perhaps the role for central aggregators or orchestrators of this data, maybe platforms or marketplaces that will take a role here?
Yeah, no, I think every organizations have to think about their own data situation and have to think of their data platform, which brings the digital twin of their supply chain and their partner ecosystem. And I think uh, such a platform, there are multiple capabilities available. Every hyperscaler you work with today have this capability, but I think one needs to understand the context of your chain, your business model, your differentiator, your cost model, and create that data model which can then work to create that data platform. So I don't think anybody will go to the market and say that I need a data platform and get me ready. That is not going to be there. But the base infrastructure everybody provides. You have to create your own data model on top of it, which complies with the law, which gives you all those levers which you need to optimize your chain.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, Anubhav, and say, it sounds like Rahul's saying that the technology is all ready. It's the businesses that are not doing enough right now. Would you agree with that, or is the problem really, do you feel that the technology is ready and it is just a people and strategy and an operating model issue, or do you still see some gaps that need to be filled?
No, technology in pieces is absolutely ready. Exactly as Rahul said, right? I don't think the issue is. I think the core point is for a company to ask what is it that is going to differentiate, and do we want to own that specific platform or data set. I think that's key, right? So, and I think that's where it's taking a little time for organizations to take that decision, because once you have taken that decision, you can clearly say and put pieces of the jigsaw puzzle saying this platform is core to me, I will own it, I will have all the data around it, but possibly the logistics and warehousing side, I'm very happy to use an aggregator and integrator. What is key is the way we architect a solutions, integration will become absolutely critical. And wherever organizations have clunky integration protocols, then the ability to create this jigsaw puzzle becomes very, very difficult, right? So I think increased focus will come because you have to integrate logistics and service providers, your warehousing, your order management systems, your planning systems, and of course the front end systems which do the order generation. So how easily they can all talk to each other, how well can they be integrated will become absolute key. My guess is for most companies, it will be a combination and mix of build versus buy. Most will build what they think is absolutely core to their business.
So still a big chunk of technology work there to do,
Absolutely.
to bring up. We're coming sort of to the end now. I just want to start looking forward a bit and ask you guys, what do you see? We've got this vision for the future. There are some, businesses doing much better than others in terms of speed, agility, visibility. Who do you see will be the winners in the next sort of 5 to 10 years? I'm not asking you to name any names, but the sort of things that you think are going to really work in this industry as we enter this new era, where there's a much more blending between online and physical and brand and retail.
Okay, so let me take that on. I think the first thing is the winners will get decided first by the mindset. Will they adopt to this AI driven, AI first mindset, right? Or they're still thinking that we can turn the ship with the traditional ways, right? So that's the first step, and that's the cultural change, which will drive the future and will choose a winner and loser. Second is the entire concept of building that infrastructure, which is people, process, technology, all the elements which we talked about. That how do we get the people ready for this change? How do we get the processes aligned to this and technology? And I think the whole technology about, we spoke about data platform, but I think the whole world of AI is moving more and more towards the AI factory, right? And essentially, what are the companies doing? They are creating value and they're extracting value and they're running their operations, right? That's their business model. in which they are doing. So they have to reconstruct that value creation and value extraction in the world of data first approach. And I think those are the companies which will win. And we already see that those companies which were not in a particular category came in, but they attacked incumbent in that category just because they were data driven approach. We have seen those winners and losers already. So I think the pattern will amplify even further and accelerate even further. So I think it is a race against time in terms of adopting to the new ways and moving towards getting the organization ready for that change.
Thanks.
No, absolutely, fully agree. And just to amplify a couple of points there, I think going back to the ecosystem, saying the ecosystem will become increasingly important, and the companies which are able to integrate the wider ecosystem and all the data coming from it faster, I think will be a huge key to success. With growing e-commerce, the whole strategy around D2C, B2B, B2B2C, that whole exactly some of the point you raised, right? What do you do as a strategy in that area? Do you buy? Do you build? Do you use a jigsaw? Do you do bespoke? I think the strategy around that piece, specifically in CPG, will absolutely become important. And then, yes, automation to manage cost, be it physical automation through cobots and AGVs, or process automation through cognitive and intelligent automation, I feel will become the third key lever for success in the future.
Okay, a harder question now. If you look into your crystal ball, Rahul, you mentioned this as a race. How far out do you think we'll be at a point where the cognitive supply chain is sort of established as the common approach across this industry? How many years out do you think we are from that?
Yeah, you have put me on spot here. Now this is difficult one to say, but I think the cycle times becomes a little more faster than what we think, and my thinking is possibly between 18 to 36 months. That's the range in which a lot of these things will become mainstream and will become absolutely integral part for success story. But we never know what comes in the way. But I think my outlook is that 18 to 36 months, a little bit longer range, where we will see this becoming absolutely mainstream, which means that those companies which have this, they actually are clear winners, and those who don't have, they start falling off. I think that is what I see.
And a lot of work in this space is already happening. I think it's a little fragmented. It's still not cohesive, and we can look at complete areas and say we are automating it. But if you look at machine learning for demand planning, or a daily planning cycle, or predictive dispatch rate, I think themes of cognitive automation across the board are already emerging. And I would take a very similar time frame. I would say by 2024, 2025, a lot of those end-to-end cognitive automation, where we actually create digital blueprint of the human mind. How do you forecast? How do you manage inventory? How do you manage service? By 24, 25, I think at scale, we would have those capabilities available.
Wow, that's great to hear. Thank you both. It's been really, really stimulating discussion. I think in summary, it's interesting to hear that, in many cases, the technology is ready. It's a big, business transformation and culture and organizational transformation challenge. But I'm very impressed that you both agree that it's happening now and will happen very quickly in the next couple of years. So great. And I look forward to making those drinks at home that you mentioned, Rahul, in the address. Thank you both. It's been really enjoyable. I'd like to thank the audience for watching as well. Once again, Anubhav and Rahul, thank you so much for your participation. And with that, I'll say goodbye and see you all next at the next Consumer Spotlight.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.